Real excited to have this group. Obviously, I don't think we need introductions, but the 4 companies represented on this panel, very innovative, very forward-thinking. Obviously, we've got Zeke with Mainstreet, Randy with V, Lori Alford with Avanti, and then Les with Thrive, and Chris Guay with Vitality. It was when we were preparing for this, I thought it was pretty interesting because you just throw one little piece at this group, and they'll start going. So we're going to try to keep this to our time. We're going to try to keep people on. Zeke said he wasn't even going to talk much, which I think that would be innovative in itself. So let's get it. So a little bit on culture, and we're really going to revolve. But one of the things I wanted to bring up, I thought this was pretty interesting yesterday. I thought Nolan was a pretty amazing person to watch. I loved his presentation because you didn't know where it was going, but anything he said was fascinating, right? It was just all over the place. But one of the points that he made, I think in our business, innovation gets tied a lot to technology, right? Everybody thinks, oh, it's all about technology and what's the next platform. And it's not. Innovation is really about inventing the future, and Nolan said that yesterday. And so we are going to try to frame this discussion more on, or I'm going to try to help push the panel to talk about more things they're looking at forward thinking, forward process when it comes to the key pieces. And as we got together and to start talking about this presentation, really thought innovation is probably in all of this, right? But the 3 elements we wanted to really focus on were culture, which Zeke started a conversation this morning on, recruitment, because we all know, if anybody hasn't heard, we have a workforce problem, we're told, right? And we want to challenge that. What is it? Is it the industry? Is it the people? What is it really? And then retention. I think we get focused on turnover, and turnover is just a measure of churning people, in my opinion. Retention is, are you really keeping people, and how are you keeping those people, and what are you doing to keep those rock stars with you? So in our mind, we thought these were 3 of the key elements to that kind of workforce discussion. And then innovation in all of that. So we're really going to try to think and push and say, okay, what's innovative? How are we thinking different? How are we really inventing the future? So Zeke already spoke, so I'm going to lead. I'm going to start with Randy. I'm going to throw the question to him first. And I told all these guys, I'm not being disrespectful, but I'm going to try to keep us all on time. Randy, you know, V's been very successful over 20 years. You've grown 30 years, so I apologize, I had that wrong.
The first 10 were terrible.
Yeah.
Since then, we've been lights out. But those 20 years.
But those last 20 have been amazing.
I've happened to have been with the company the last 20 years.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so and that's what I'm saying, Randy. It was when you got there, it really got it.
Yeah, right, exactly.
But now, as you look forward, obviously your organization has had success. But now, as you start looking forward, in your mind, what does a winning culture look like in the future as we see a changing customer with changing demands and a changing workforce? What does that winning culture look like?
Well, you know, a lot of the things that Zeke commented on, I think, rang true as I was listening to his presentation. And for us, what we've really focused on is the people in the organization, because really what we provide on a daily basis, we build nice communities and so forth, but what we're really providing on a daily basis is service and care. And all of that happens through people. So in order to provide really high quality service and care, you have to have a culture that people, and provide an environment for people to thrive and work and fulfill their work expectations and do the best they can. And that's how you satisfy the customer. I mean, ultimately, I consider our people in the organization the secret sauce. And we talked, we'll get into turnover. I'll have some other comments there that I think are relevant. But so I don't see us changing the way that we will approach the business in the future. I think we obviously will do things differently. As you can't just get into one formula and stay there. You've got to be always looking at how you can do things better. So one of the things I like to talk about in our organization that I think we've developed, or at least we strive to develop, is a culture of excellence. In other words, what is it that we're not doing very well? And let's get people together and figure out how we can do that better and set that in motion, develop an action plan, and execute against that. And when you've achieved what you think is the appropriate outcome, reevaluate it and reset and recalibrate. And now what's the next hill that we can climb, so to speak? And it's a process that takes time and diligence, and leadership ultimately has to be motivating them. But it allows you to understand where if you're brutally honest with your shortcomings in an organization, it allows you then to call those out and say, all right, guys, let's try to figure out how we can do this better. And I'm a big believer that all the answers are in the organization. You just have to bring the right people together in order to develop solutions that make sense.
So taking that piece, what's something that's been innovative that you're looking to the future that you're saying, okay, we're going to do it. How do I keep that culture of excellence? But what's a tool or something you're doing differently that you think is unique to V?
Well, I don't know if it's one thing that we've really focused on. I don't know if it's necessarily unique, but in order to, you need information in order to understand where you can focus your efforts and your energy. So I'll go to turnover now real quick. We had over the years had a problem with turnover in various positions. Not necessarily systemically across the organization, but in certain positions, we just weren't doing a good job. And so we did a kind of a forensic study on everything that we were doing, right from the hiring start of the hiring process and the onboarding process, and learn some things about what we weren't doing right. Part of it was the job description wasn't, believe it or not, as simple as that sounds. It wasn't crafted as it should have been for this particular position. But as a result of that whole exercise, we developed an onboarding process. We call it V-Wings. And it's a 1-year process for all new employees. It's very intensive in the first 90 to 180 days, and then it's more of a check-in process through the balance of the year. And we're actually scoring. Here's what we want to try to accomplish together with this new person. And this is for any person. It could be an hourly wage worker or a manager, and it may be more intensive with somebody in a management position. And when we instituted this program, we found that we had a much better retention rate for those positions where we were having a turnover problem, because we were able to very quickly determine whether they fit the culture early on in the process and not let it go 2 or 3 years down the road where now we're facing a management decision to change somebody in that role. But we could do it quickly. Mm-hmm. And a lot of the involuntary turnover that we had at that time was really coming in the first year. So we've tried to focus on that area.
Good. So thank you, Randy. So Lori, you've got a really unique brand, and it's really part of the culture of what Avanti is. So how do you, in talking about attracting those right people, how do you think your culture influences the folks who want to be part of your company, and how does that ultimately focus on your brand or impact your brand?
Yeah, so we we talk a lot about who we sell to, who we employ, and who we serve are female. And our organization is a primarily led female organization. And so our branding and everything that we do speaks, looks, acts very feminine. And all due respect, has nothing to do with, we're not man haters, we love men too, but
good, we feel better now.
Yeah.
Everyone was clenching a little bit.
Les is like, why am I on this panel?
You're like,
But let's be real. Majority of our residents are female. Majority of our employees are female. And in assisted living and memory care, who we serve to is that adult daughter or daughter-in-law. Right. And so we really speak to that. And a part of that, just outside of our marketing and stuff and our company, we really focus a lot on speaking to women in how you can be very successful as a working woman, but also very successful as being that working mom and wife and friend and all of these other things that a lot of times in the workforce, you shouldn't talk about. And we speak a lot to that. One of the things is we say we don't ever apologize for needing to go have lunch with your children or go see your children win an award. We don't apologize and we don't pretend that doesn't happen. We really celebrate those type of things and work with, the ladies in our organization on how to do that and really talk about the struggles that we all face and how to balance that. And it's really become a part of our culture. And with that, we also get to say a little bit to what Zeke was saying. We don't allow drama in our organization. And when we're interviewing, we all get to say, we're females, so we know it. We're all kind of wired that way. And we don't tolerate the drama. We don't backstab. We don't bring women down in the organization. Rather, we lift each other up and we help each other climb those corporate ladders to break that glass ceiling. And we speak that not just amongst my immediate leadership team, we speak that to a housekeeper or to our care partners. And what's been really kind of cool is to see the residents, who again are a lot of females, and a lot of them now are also, that are entering into our communities, have worked as well. And they were, the first female VP of a bank, or the first woman that, I don't know, I had one that she modeled spray-on pantyhose or something. I don't know, it's way beyond what I ever did. But I had to love her because she was the first, right? I was like, this is odd. It was kind of weird. But it's been really kind of neat to see that and to watch the residents also really kind of mentor and pour over women in our organization as well and supporting them. So.
Good. It's interesting. It's spray on pantyhose. I learned something new. That's the most innovative thing I've learned
Yeah,
today.
like spray on pantyhose. I don't know about it.
Don't even know how to even think about that. So Les, we were talking last night, and you're kind of from outside the industry, right? You come into it. I'm interested in your perspective on, as you've met with other companies, your own organization, where do you think we might be missing on culture? Where are some things you think other industries or industries you're from that we could really improve and look to kind of really hone our culture from an innovative perspective?
That's good. We've had so many bullets that we've had thrown out from the stage. I mean, fantastic. Michael, the experience has been wonderful, new relationships. But there's been so much data that's been thrown at us. And so trying to write as fast as we can or using recording devices to follow up with, the ability for us to go back and implement anything that we learned this week is so granular, so small, to actually put it to effect. Because for any sustained activity to be continued, there has to be a belief and a core value that this is the only right way to do it. Mm-hmm. So from coming in outside the industry 4 years ago, I started at what most organizations would consider the bottom, right? That we would call it the hourly employees. And so there's some functional definitions and terminologies, like do I believe that words matter? Do you believe that words matter? If they do, does the word staff, does it grind on you when you hear the word staff? Because no one wants to be a part of staff, they want to be a part of a team. Does the word manager grind on you? People follow managers because they have to. People follow leaders because of who they are. They look at their life, they see something about it, and they say, I want to follow this person. It's a totally different. So to Zeke's point that he was saying just a minute ago about how do you create culture, we set the climate, but the climate starts with what we believe. And so as we leave today and as we start processing all this, we really have to start with what do we think about the people and the opportunities that we have available within our organization. So fundamentally, I spent time interviewing every single care team worker. It took a couple of months, every single one sitting down saying, what do we ask you to do that's a waste of time? When do you feel most productive? When does your heart come alive? And the problem, the first day, was I was dressed like this. So the second day, I realized, I'm like, man, I'm really good at connecting with people. Why are these people not resonating? And they're sitting very proper, lots of yes sirs and Mr. Les. And I'm like, don't call me Mr. again. And as we're taking notes. So the next day I came in with a t-shirt, jeans on, and a hat on backwards, right? Still have the same title, but they're visually thinking, I can relate to this person. So the answers started becoming more aligned with reality. Well, what do we ask you to do that's a waste of time? Not because I'm trying to convince them, but it's possible that we shouldn't have them doing that thing. And so what happens is we create a culture of understanding, man, where can we put the right people in the right seats? And your people already know, but we're too busy in meetings up with whiteboards, strategizing without pulling the people that are actually implementing it into the room. And so fundamentally, we don't have meetings without having somebody that's going to be implementing the action in the room to represent that group themselves, right? Because we're really, really smart. You guys are, probably way smarter than me, but we're not smart enough to implement things in the absence of people who actually have to do them, right? They need to have a voice in the room. And so I could keep going, but for time's sake, those are some of the things that we've done.
I'm sorry.
Go, no, you go ahead, Zeke.
He hits on a really interesting thing, is that there's a lot of stuff that leadership tries to do that ends up in a we versus they mentality. And so the leadership will be saying, we're doing this, all this, and
They're saying they.
The team is like, they are telling us to do these things, and that disconnect is massive.
Yeah, it's good.
Particularly when you start getting communities set up and you have these different operating pieces we can get being silos, that disconnect is incredible. And trying to break down those silos and break down that communication channel is very difficult. So one of the innovative things we've done there is I started doing what I call fireside chats with the CEO. It's very casual. We all sit in kind of a living room environment, and I ask a bunch of really pointed questions. I like, hey, what do people think about us that you hear? Or what do our vendors think about us? What do our customers think about us? What do you think we're doing right? What do you think we're doing wrong? What frustrates you in your job? And it's amazing. I mean, the funniest one was our accountants were really frustrated because they didn't have a printer. They had to go across the hall. It turns out later that our development company was frustrated because the printer was always out of paper. And we're like, oh, I think you're printing on that paper. And we're like, could we just get them a printer? And it was this really small thing that was frustrating them every single day to do their job. And it just got missed somehow. And so we're like, can we just get them a printer? And we could. And it was like, they were so excited about that. And it seems so irrelevant, but it actually mattered. But this we versus they thing is really important to break down.
I think it's interesting. All good, really good points. I think when you talk about culture, everybody's looking for that magic, sauce or that secret bullet. And a lot of times it's those simple things and then involving the whole organization, because we do a lot of conversations about, you said something, you start at the ground level. If you really think about the fundamentals of our business, the caregiver is the top level.
Yeah, absolutely.
Without the caregiver, nothing happens. So it's framing that, and you said earlier in your culture discussion, framing the fact that as a leader, you've got to set that tone, and you got to walk it, live it, and breathe it, and resist the urge to dictate from the ivory tower, right? I'm lucky I don't live in a big ivory tower now. I'm barely a tower, or a little small, short tower. But it's been innovative for me to be back from, 250 buildings to 2, and you reconnect, and those simple things that make a difference are not technologically innovative, but they're innovative in the fact that you're inspiring your workforce, the most important aspect of the force, to be able to really accomplish something, do something different, and be part of the solution. And those little things are amazing, because I do those same meetings. When you make those little connections and you solve a simple problem, it's pretty amazing. So let's move and evolve this a little bit. We're kind of starting to go into recruitment, and I'm going to kind of weave the culture and recruitment, and I'm going to bring you into this piece, because you said something in between this about, we're talking about turnover and how that affects and how do we recruit, and we're talking about rock stars. And you made a comment that at Mainstreet, you had pretty low turnover for a while. You guys thought that was great. And then you said, that's not good. Let's change that. And we changed. And so it's an interesting, so this is kind of a culture recruitment question, right? Because people think they equate good culture with low turnover, and you kind of said the opposite. So tell me how you have some turnover to protect culture versus dismantling culture.
So if you think about that idea of talent density, people automatically think about the idea of recruiting well to increase the talent density. But also you have to come from the other side as well, is you have to prune appropriately. And what we found actually is that in a great culture, so this is kind of the dark underbelly of a great culture, is that people tend to not want to let people go. And because you start to feel like family and you start to feel so close to them, we have about, I think, 60-70% of our workforce are women. And so with that, there's a lot of maternal love that ends up there. And we talk about truth and grace in equal measure. And we have almost always erred on the side of grace. And so what happens a lot of times is that, and this is a true experience for us, is that you try not to let people go, and you're in the grace-filled culture where you're always overlooking people's shortcomings and not really being honest with them. Which leads to a whole host of different problems. So we actually had very low turnover. We had like less than 5% turnover for a very long period of time, probably 3 years. And what was actually happening is we were kind of building up a little bit of a ticking time bomb there, so that when actually a few things shifted in our company and we made a couple of organizational changes, we had several people leave all at once. And then that created this whole people like, what is going on here? What's happening? Like, people are leaving. We're like, yeah, they should. And those are probably we didn't fight for any of those to stay, which told us a lot about who they were. So what we found is that we've had to drive back into that, and I'll be really candid about it, we're not great at it yet. We still err on the side of grace, and we're trying to drive more truth speaking into our culture. What we've done is actually use some new technology and operating systems to drive into that, which seems almost counterintuitive, but we've tried to create better scorecards inside of our company so we can actually go through every single person, have the clear expectations with them, and then talk about are they measuring up? And it's amazing to see what happens when you actually get into that conversation, how clear it is to almost everybody around them that that person really, wonderful person, but they shouldn't be with us. And it's very, very rare that we really have to let somebody go because of bad behaviors or what we call antithetical behaviors. It ends up really being that they're just not getting the job done, and that's causing problems across the whole. But we actually have to seek to promote more turnover than less, which is a little different than the way most people think about their hiring and firing process.
Well, that's interesting. So you, and I know you and Lori started talking about traction and the whole piece. I think you both use it. I think Thrive uses this principle. And it involves combining technology, right? Because you're using a software platform to kind of drive some decisions and kind of grade and go through. So let's talk a little bit of that, because that's a very innovative way of saying, okay, we're bringing people in the organization, we're scoring them. And because our business is very much a people. We're a business of people serving people. So I think sometimes that emotion gets into it, right? You want to work with people you like. It's like your family. They're not always the best. The people you like are not always the best people to have around you at times, right? Or good for your organization. So let's talk a little about that system that you all use and how it's affected and how it's made a difference. Maybe you lead with that. Since Lori said she introduced it to Thrive, we'll let Lori start.
We just call for help.
I did. They've introduced us to quite a bit too, but we did give them that credit. It's a book called Traction. It's what Zeke had recommended earlier, that entrepreneurial operating system. In our company, we have 10 department heads, so we call our meetings, because we also do it at our home office level, but then we've recently, about a year ago, implemented it down into the community level, where we have 10 department heads, so they're called L10 meetings, Leadership 10. And one of the things that I really like about it, as Zeke was saying, is not necessarily, we're not scoring people, we're scoring, are they accomplishing what matters most in their job? And it's fact-based. Are you on track? Are you off track? Are you meeting that goal? Are you not? And it's just data, because you either are or you aren't. And it takes away that emotion and keeps everything very fact-based. And what it does is it creates an environment of vulnerability, because you have to say if you're on track, or I'm not meeting my goal. That's very vulnerable to speak publicly in front of your peers. And transparency, no, I'm not, and here's why. Because I don't know what I'm doing and I need help, and I'm just being transparent on my, and accountability amongst your peers. And what it's done for our organization, especially at the community level, is it's allowed all of our department heads have a well-rounded view of what makes that whole community operate. So from engagement to wellness to, taste, our dining program, to maintenance, everyone knows what's going on that's going to ultimately, drive the census and profit and all of these great things and overall care. So it takes people out of their silos and puts people to function as a team, but more importantly, then it also creates that level of accountability of whether they're making their scorecard goals, so to speak, or not. And then we also do that in our review process. We utilize those same concepts, and that helps create their quarterly reviews, because they help set what what kind of rocks or goals they want to accomplish every single quarter. They set them as a community and they break them down individually, and then it forces us as an organization to give reviews every single quarter versus this annual review, and it just helps the whole community create traction and move forward by being transparent, accountable, and vulnerable. And it helps weed people out naturally on their own, because when you're sitting in these weekly meetings that are very structured, they're only an hour and a half, and they have to say, no, I'm not, my sales are, I'm not making my sales goals, or I'm not making my sales. And a lot of times people don't naturally like to say, no, I'm not doing things. And they actually end up leaving the organization themselves, because they recognize they aren't capable of doing good for that whole team, and they don't want to let the team down.
The connective point for me that was really interesting, this is a bit self-interested from my position, is that, everybody I think intuitively gets that the people matter, right? Because you hear everybody say that, right? It's about the people, and that somehow that connects to what you're trying to accomplish in an organization, but everything in between seems to be really ambiguous. And it can be often really murky about, am I making this change? Is that really going to make a difference? What this has done is given me a very clear picture of how we're going to be here in 10 years, and we know exactly what that looks like, right? There'll be pivots, but we're going to be here in 10 years. All the way down to what that single person has to do over the next 90 days and whether they're on track or off track to make sure we hit that 10-year goal. I mean, it's incredible to see how clear that picture becomes when you have one cohesive operating system inside of your business.
You know what else I found? You probably have found it too, is through this operating system, it teaches them how to identify, discuss, and solve an issue. And so a lot of times what happens when you go into the community, or in not even a community, but just even your home office, the whole culture, people are like, well, there's a problem. Can you fix it? Well, wait a minute, no, don't dump problems on me. Solve it yourself. And by this whole process, it makes that team, whether it's community or my leadership team or our development team or whoever, they identify issues, they bring them to the table, and they discuss them as a team, and they solve them. And unless it's something really big or life-shattering or something that's kind of going to be a lot of money, I don't need to know about, because you solved it as a team, and I'm going to trust you that that's the right thing to do for the organization. And so it weeds out noise, and it doesn't stifle business from moving forward because they have a problem, because it forces them to constantly identify and talk and resolve problems. And a lot of the feedback we've gotten from our department heads is, this has been phenomenal, because I feel like I'm truly for the first time empowered in my own building to solve problems. And all the department heads are like, I understand what makes a whole community run versus just my one department, because I get to hear issues that every department has, and I get to use my voice to help solve it.
Good point, Les. You want
Yeah, and on the recruiting side, a lot of this starts with what we're saying versus what we believe. So if we just sit on that for a minute, right? What are you saying in your recruiting, regardless of the position, care team, executive director, sales and marketing, we call them CRDs, but what are you saying versus what you believe? And so if what I'm saying is it's an unbelievable opportunity for an executive director, it's an unbelievable opportunity, you have the ability to run your own business, within running a business, there's these things that we say, but fundamentally, do I, as the leaders, the people that are sitting in this room, believe that it's a wonderful, incredible, you have the opportunity to run an $8 million business with 50 employees. So when we sit down with an executive director, if I don't fundamentally believe that that's the opportunity, over time, what I believe about that opportunity will come out once they come to work for us. Mm-hmm. So I've got to address my beliefs about the opportunity prior, because if I believe it's, hey, this is a life-changing for some people, right? And so it also affects the way that we're recruiting frontline care team, the ones that are the hands and feet of the organization. So, from the outside, it would look like a novel concept that when we draw our accountability chart, my name is at the bottom. And so they say, oh, that's cute, right? It's a cute thing because people think, oh, they think that we're the ones that are leading the company. But I have to address before I put this out, is it something that would cause retention and recruitment to go up? Or do I fundamentally believe that my job as a leader is to infect, engage, and bring about the goals of everyone, the chief operating officer, chief, CFO, all the people that I spend time developing to empower them to go do their jobs, because it allows me to run my life at a pace and a pace that when they look, they go, man, the upward mobility, growth in my career doesn't mean increased stress and I lose my family and my kids are going to hate me, right? They think, man, this is phenomenal. This is a great opportunity. So again, before we could talk about tactics all day, and you can go implement them, and you're not going to keep doing them unless you fundamentally change the way we think about the opportunity at each one of the positions. Nick Saban, he's a football coach, does a decent job with Alabama. And we were in an intimate setting with him, and we said, he was talking about winning culture, and how do you keep putting out top-level teams over and over and over again, because they have to cycle them out. And he said, he kind of leaned forward and he said, it's very simple. My players know why they're there, where they're running, and how they're going to get there every single play. And so I walked away going, why they're there, how they're going to get there, and where they're going every single play. So we look back, and so that's a model from athletics that we'd say, if I sat down with an executive director, I know it's all of y'all buildings, pray for us, we're still trying to get there. You're all there, I'm sure. But if I sat down and went into 8 or 9, 10, 15, 25, 55 of your buildings and sat down with the executive director and said, hey, what's your job? Would every one of them say the same thing? Because if everything in life rises and falls on leadership, if everything rises and falls on leadership, the leader of that community is the chief shepherd, the guider of everything that happens there. Do we look at them that way? And do they all say the same thing? So fundamentally, the definition of an executive director at Thrive is we're building people, building sales, and building profit. Building people, building census, building profit. Sorry, building people, building census, building profit. Which one's first? All of them are equally important, but we always start with building people. Who are the people we build? And then they need to, remember, that's what your job is, and then how do you do your job? So we can leave, again, with a bunch of conceptual things, but if I'm sitting on the backside like I have out in those seats today, I want to be able to leave with some tactical things. So what's running through our head is, do your executive directors, the leaders, in your absence, when you go away and they're on site, would they be able to say, I know exactly what my job is? I know exactly where I'm supposed to be, and I know exactly why I'm here. And so the last point would be, how do we, from a recruiting standpoint, develop that? There's a slide deck I highly encourage everyone to go read. Netflix put it out about 8 or 9 years ago, and it's their whole culture on a deck. And so I'm reading through this, and I couldn't click through it fast enough. It's 140 pages, but you'll go through it in about 7 minutes. You look it up, it's free trade, it's all out there. And so what we've done is taken, what does it mean to be a part? Who are we as Thrive? It's on a slide deck. So I put the slide deck together. I got my picture of Thrive, right? Who is Thrive? And I put it together. It's 62 slides. And so all I did is around our key leaders, our executive team, I floated it out. We took them out on a retreat, got out on a lake. And I said, hey, I'm gonna walk you guys through something. And it's not final. What I want you to do is I want you to say why you fundamentally disagree with anything that's on this, or you would fight for it till the day you died. And so we went through slide by slide, and I see him start taking notes. I'm like, well, that one's probably getting kicked out, that page. And so what ended up happening is it was a group think about what the culture was. And then from there, we pivoted and passed it to the next line of leadership. And right now, it's on the 3rd level leadership being circulated around the organization, and everyone's taking ownership of what we believe. Now, before someone comes on to get interviewed, we pass it across the table and say, after the first interview, we say, I want you to go home and read this, click through it, takes about 6 minutes. If you don't like this deck, you're going to hate working here. If it resonates with you at a deep level of saying, I would fight for this till the day I died, you're going to love working here. And so it creates from that recruiting chasm, we're telling you, here's how we are, and you're going to hate working here if it's not there. So again, a tactical thing you guys can take home. It's not mine, it's somebody else's. Just put it to use quickly.
No, it's good, great points. So now let's marinate that down to a little bit as we move into retention. I'll throw this out, whoever wants to answer it. Okay, we're all going after the same workforce, right? We're competing against each other. We're competing against, I use this example. Up the road from my house, the gas station's paying $13 an hour, right? So you can either, do a really hard job and taking care of people and all the things that go good and bad with that, or you can go punch a register for 13 bucks an hour, and we're kind of competing with that. So what is something, whoever wants to start this and answer, something truly unique you think your organizations do that you're willing to share as a secret sauce to start to recruit that workforce, that single mom who's trying to feed 2 kids, who's trying to make ends meet, who we know has a passion for what we do, but still has to live. What's something you're doing unique to kind of resonate your culture and recruit that person and get them to
You've got to invest in your people. That's the way I look at it. I mean, look, some of these things are really fundamental. Let's start with hiring and firing. They're the 2 areas you can make the biggest mistake. And if you don't hire right, you're going to have a problem. If you don't fire right, you're going to have a problem. And it's even worse in that situation because the team members in your organization are going to look at the leader and say, why do they tolerate this? Why are we tolerating this individual in an organization that really doesn't live what we do? So, you've got to start there. And then when you get into retention, we got so frustrated years ago with trying to go outside the organization to hire an executive director and bring them into our organization and see if they could fit and test drive all of that. And so we said, let's stop doing that. Let's develop an internal training program so that we can create career paths for people inside the organization. And I think a big part of retention in our company today, the reason why we're be able to retain the good people is that we've reinvested in them. We're giving them the tools, we're helping them train up to be an even better manager or a leader in a different part of the organization and give them opportunity. And they in turn, kind of apostolize that then throughout the organization. it's not easy. You got to spend money on it. And a lot of this stuff is just not available off the shelf. You have to tailor it and craft it to, what you want your organization to be like. I think that's a very important part of what we have accomplished over the years in developing what I would call, a high-performing workforce, is being able to, reinvest in our people. They recognize that that the company is putting something, back into their life, into their opportunity to develop. Some people say, why do you do all of this? You're just going to train people, they're going to leave and go work for somebody else. I said, fine, we should be happy to train the world. I mean, we should be proud to do that if we could. And you know what? It doesn't happen that way. We're a lot more sticky because of, the approach that we've taken with training and development.
It's really about how do we create careers, not jobs.
Yes.
Right? And I think right now a lot of our industry is looked as jobs, not careers,
Right.
and you've got to invest. I think as we talk about retention, a lot of times the barrier is I can't afford to take a year to train somebody, right? I don't have that time, or we can't let someone
You know
work.
how much money it costs to, just the turnover? Do you know how much money that
Oh,
actually costs?
it's
It's the training investment pales
Pales in comparison.
in comparison to it, and there's any measurement you want to look at, turnover costs you money. And,
Well,
and you can manage it.
It's people find reasons, they make their own story up to why things aren't going, instead of investing the time to really understand the reality and talk about retention. So as we talk about creating career paths and changing the perception of our business and retaining people, what are some key things? Like Zeke, you showed some great, I love the videos, the use of social media. What are some innovative ways you're trying to also engage people so they stay with the organization? You recognize those that are good and retain them.
We're pretty much a meritocracy. We have a number of people who have started in one place and moved to another. I love that aspect. In fact, I think connects to the recruitment side. So something innovative that we're trying to do is to be non-competitive in our hiring process. Go where other people aren't. It's amazing how shallow the talent pool really is and how competitive it is, and people are just bidding on dollars, which to me sounds an awful lot like a commodity business, and I don't really have any interest in being a commodity. So we're trying to cut to different angles. If you think about it this way, so it's a bit of a forward look to retention, is that if we are going to be around in 10 years and we're going to be hiring college graduates, those kids are in 5th and 6th grade right now. Well, what are we doing to impact people in 5th and 6th grade that ultimately might lead them to be in a career with us in 10 years? And that is so bizarre when you talk to HR professionals. They're just like, what? You can't talk to junior high kids? But why not?
Yeah.
And I'm shocked that as big as our industry is, healthcare in general, and then you break it down to these various sub-segments, is that we don't have training programs. We don't have our own schools. We don't train nurses. We don't go out and recruit people into fields to be business leaders. I mean, so our rapid recovery centers are $13 to $50 million revenue businesses. You're talking about $8 million revenue businesses. I mean, there are people coming out of school who would kill for that opportunity to run a business like that. And we never even talk to them, let alone create a path for them.
They don't even know about the industry.
I don't even know about that. So, that front end recruiting has to change dramatically, but that also leads then to the career opportunities that actually show them, like, this is what can be like for you, and this is what it can be like for you over time. And then I think for us, we've had to continue to evolve our business such that we're not becoming static and just doing the same thing. And that ultimately gives people those extra opportunities to move into a whole different world. Like we have one example real quick is that we have somebody who started with us as a paralegal. And over the last several years, she's actually moved around a couple of times to some different areas of interest for her and now runs our entire design team. And it's amazing to see that evolution and the career path there to where she has incredibly high ceiling and we just keep pushing her to grow. But that's something that's really helped us in terms of retaining. So a term I just picked out, and then I'll end so that people can talk, is this term brownout. Is a term I just picked up in the last week. And we understand burnout and when people hit the wall and they leave. But this idea of brownout where people are just kind of doing the same thing every day, they don't know how it connects, they don't know if they're making a difference, and they just kind of start settling in into kind of this normalcy that just is not really all that exciting, that person's leaving your organization at some point. You just don't know it. And interestingly, a lot of those people might actually be your top performers and your rock stars, and they may even be still showing it because that's who they are, that's what they believe, but they're going to eventually to the point where they're like, I just don't want to do this anymore. And how do we got to get into that person's head and understand them better and make sure that they're continuing to be driven and pushed so that they can go to the next level.
You're shaking your head.
So a little bit different, so you can walk away with something. One of the things that we've been doing the past year, 9 months, is one of the things we speak is just be you, because you is perfect. And one of the things I've always seen in my career is folks that come to work and they have to pretend to be someone that they're not. So like a salesperson who's really an introvert has to pretend to be an extrovert because they have to go outside marketing and actually socialize with people, which is a novel concept. Why, I know it's thought-provoking for a salesperson to like people, but when they're an introvert and they're forced to do that, then, it creates these peaks and valleys, and they end up leaving, or, one day they're doing, 1 month is great, they're hitting their sales, the next month they're slumped, because they're tired and they're not able to be them, so they're using a lot of energy to do that. So we've actually been profiling 7 basic traits. We started with our salespeople, then we moved to EDs, then business office. Now we're actually profiling care partners and our med aides. And what we've done is we've said, okay, out of our top, let's have everybody do kind of we're not supposed to say testing, but like people that implement it aren't here, so the test takes about 8 minutes. And it's not Myers-Briggs. It doesn't tell us how to manage people. It doesn't tell us how to reward them. It doesn't tell us how to talk to them. It just tells us 7 basic traits of who they are. And so we had everyone do it, and then we broke it down and said, out of all of our care partners, ironically, very, very interestingly, all the ones that we would consider top performing, they all have the same exact profile. And same thing with our salespeople, same thing with our business office managers. And what we basically have done is we've now implemented that into our recruiting process. And so they take this less than 8-minute little test, and it's picked on words, because again, we're not looking to how to manage people. We're looking for who they are, because we want to hire who they ultimately are, even on a bad day. And so if depending upon the position, if they come back and their traits don't match the profile that we know ultimately makes them successful, we don't even take it to the next level. We don't care what their resume says. We don't care who referred them, because we know ultimately if they don't fit that pattern, when they come to work, then they have to pretend to be someone they're not, which means it's just really hard for them. And that means when they're having a bad day, it's really hard for them to check that drama at the door. And they can't come to work and be who they are and ultimately just shine. And so we've implemented that, and we're now testing it through our care partners. And it's been really great to see the feedback from the community, because they love it. And I know it sounds really weird, and people at first, at least within my organization, when we implemented this, everybody kind of scratched their head and they were like, Lori, we know you're crazy, but now we really think you're crazy. But now that they've all seen it for themselves, and we also use that to speak about ourselves. So for instance, one of my traits, I'm not a very detailed person.
No.
Yeah, and I'm like real ADD, and I go kind of all over the place.
Shocking.
And so, but now my team, we use it to know about each other, and so my team will say, Lori, hey, we need you to sit down because we need some detail from you. And we don't use it I don't take that as criticism. I take it as, oh, hey, that's a cue. They need this from me because they're really detailed, and now I have to implement patience, which again, I don't have a lot of, but I have to implement patience to give them that detail so that they can be successful. And again, it's just allowing them to be them, and they're letting me be me, because they recognize asking me for detail every single day, 10 hours a day, it doesn't let me be me. And so they let me live in my space of just crazy ideas all day long. But when they need me to lean into who they are, then they let me know. And so it's been a great tool throughout our organization, just to let people be you and be them to shine the best.
So as we start to kind of close down here the last couple of minutes, I think it's interesting, innovation, the Nolan Bushnell quote, is inventing the future. We've talked about a lot of key points. I think, just want to dig into something quickly that Zeke said. We think too, we're long-term. We're supported by nonprofits, so we're long-term. We're always thinking, how are we going to operate this business for 20 years? And I think that the point, I have a 15-year-old daughter, and I think of her. And I say, how am I going to get her to be attracted to this business? On the flip side, we also have my 92-year-old grandfather. How are we going to get him to be passionate? But when you really look at those two individual groups, there are some connections that I think are really valuable. I think we've got to be very purposeful in the words, the language, right? We talk about, I always say, we try not to use senior. My grandfather gets pissed off every time I call him a senior, right? He's not a senior. So I don't know what that new word's going to be, but we got to change that. So we got to, evolve our language, right? I think language is very important, not just with our residents, but with our team members, right? And we call them team members. We don't call them employees. Because that's important. I think we get so focused on the resident, we've got to also be innovative and creative for that team member, for those folks that really are going to drive, and how we're going to make them feel empowered and passionate about what they do. We're really big on design. We do some great design elements for the people who are going to live 24 hours in the building, but some of our team members live almost 24 hours in the building. So really making sure, being thoughtful with your design, whether it's new developments, I know Lori does this too, we design into our communities really nice team member centers that are very engaging. We have full spas, full gyms that are for our team members too, not just for our residents, because I think that intergenerational piece is huge. But even if you're refurbing, some of us are buying older buildings, think about the spaces that are not just for your residents, but for your team members too, because that's engaging. And then I think it's being innovative in your processes. There's a lot of great things you can do, but are your processes innovative? I'll go back to my 15-year-old daughter. I don't think she's had a textbook since 5th grade, right? She doesn't look at paper. Everything's paperless. I know this because I'm at Geek Squad every other week fixing her laptop because it's broken. And it's if we don't start really pushing, and it's an investment, like Randy talked about the training, we have got to start investing in some of these things to really make sure that we stay competitive with the coming workforce. And so that simple example of being paperless, and that's our goal, one of our goals is to be completely paperless. One, because I hate paper and it's cluttery and it creates a mess, and I can't read my own writing, so if it's all typed, it's better. But secondly, because we have a workforce coming into that we need to attract that doesn't, you hand them a MAR book or you hand them a manual to read and they're going to look at you like you're crazy. These people are typing papers on an iPhone. I was with some boys this week and this kid's writing a paper on his iPhone. I'm like, how do you do that? I'm like, really? But we've got to get creative in that way and really push forward with that kind of innovative thought process, or we won't evolve. And we'll end up being behind and we'll never solve this problem. Because the question I would put out there is, do we have a turnover problem or do we have a retention problem? And I would say this industry has a retention problem because we attract residents and associates and team members to a lifestyle of interaction, engagement, and empowerment. And then we take a lot of that away because of our fear and our concerns and what we've always done. So I think that the point of this is challenge yourselves to think at every little piece differently. And I'll end in a quick story. I have a great ED, old school guy, one of the best EDs I've ever worked with, but he's old school. Called me the other day and said, we don't have a cell phone policy. I said, yes, that's correct. We need a cell phone policy. And I said, okay, why? Well, they're abusing their cell phone. Their employees are abusing the cell phone. And I said, so what are they doing? Well, they're on it, this and that. And I said, oh, so I said, Jack, do you have your cell phone with you all the time? Yeah. Do you abuse it? No. I said, so it's not a cell phone problem. It's a people problem. It's a management problem. And so that little change, because you tell a millennial they cannot have their phone with them, that you take an emergency call, it's going to come in on a landline, they're going to tell you you're crazy. It's not how they communicate. So I think
Probably like, what is a landline?
Yeah, what is it?
Exactly.
I always like, what's a payphone?
It's connected to the wall.
So the point to that is we've got to, I think, evolve our thought process and get away from some of our own norms to be innovative. And that's what this group I think really represents it. So with that, I'll stop there. We're down to 12 seconds, but I don't know, do we want to take questions or do we have time?
We have time for a couple of questions.
Okay, great.
Give it to Lynn.
So thanks. That was inspiring, wonderful. I took copious notes and I have lots of questions for you, but I'll save many of them. The one thing you guys didn't really address is wages and benefits. And, I'm finding that to be a big issue. We committed to minimum $15 an hour minimum wage, and I will be honest, it's not making the difference. We've gone to creative benefits. That's helping a little bit, but I'd love your insight on that.
I think you can't ignore the elephant in the room. Everybody was freaking out a while back about $15 an hour wages. So I had our accounting people, I said, go in and graduate everybody's wages on a relative basis, on a basis of $15 an hour. The economic impact was not nearly as great as I had, been thinking it might be. So that was point one. And on benefits, years ago we had some, a lot of the things that we are doing today that I think we're doing well are because we didn't do it well in the past. And we had to learn our way through some of those issues, and benefits was one area. Benefits are to, to an hourly employee, benefits are a very, very important part of their compensation package. I mean, we have, education benefits that we've incorporated so people can go to college and get reimbursed. Things like that really it really makes it sticky. But you also need to do one important thing. You need to tell people what their benefits are. And the greatest impact that we've been able to get over the years with respect to benefits is developing a really, wholesome communication plan around an employee benefits package. What are you really getting? What's it really worth to you? What does the company contribute to your benefit plan? So, because a lot of people, we didn't have that great a participation in 401k plans, and so why not? It was because people didn't really understand the real benefit to them. And if you take the time to really put together a great communication plan and continually reinforce the program with people, it helps a lot. And then you also need to say, hey, we heard you. You told us that we're crummy in this area, one area or another, and we went back and looked at it, and we're making this change that is going to make a positive impact on your benefit program. But you need to communicate it.
Yeah, I will just say real quick, I kind of steered us away from wage, because the reality is we're going to have to increase our wages. We barely give our line staffs a livable wage in a lot of areas still. And so we know that's coming. And I think the turnover issue, if we could solve and increase that, Randy and I were talking about, that'll pay for a lot of this wage inflation. I go back to what the Honor CEO said yesterday. I think it's more. I think if we empower and really do a better job of showing people why this is a great industry and what it is, I think it'll help us improve that kind of retention piece and help us improve the type of person we get, which will make ultimately our turnover decrease, will get us better cost, better outcomes.
You asked the question, and I was watching the posture. There's a bunch of A-types up here because we're all on our knees waiting for our turn to go say something. Real quick, everyone in the room, most of your buildings, I'm sure, self-funded that you all wrote your own checks for. We have investors that we have to keep in mind, right, to guard returns, and we have one responsibility for every investor, and that's take their dollar and make it grow. That's one boss. And then the other bosses that we have are every resident who comes to us, and they have competing interests, right? So all of our residents want 1-to-1 care ratios, all our investors want 37-to-1 care ratios, and somewhere in between we have to find a balanced blend. And so we have to lead from a principle mindset, not a tactical mindset. And the principle is, does everyone who work with us, should they have the ability to retire? So we're working out of a 10 or 15-year vision where we can move our company to a place where everyone has the ability to retire. So with that said, we met with EDs, and we sit down and said, let me ask you something. If you had the ability to make 30% more income, would you be willing to work without a business office manager? They said, no, that's interesting. Because, I'm going to throw out this, again, something we can go back and implement and get our brains ticking. If there's a business office manager that you guys use and makes $30,000, $40,000, $50,000, $60,000, we take $30,000 and contribute it, you get a different talent level for your ED, right? And now they're able to work, and top performers can do more than average performers. So they'd say, if I get the additional $30,000 to my salary, I got all kinds of extra time that I'll be able to come back up here. Or at least that's an opportunity. It's not a guarantee, but it's connected to some sort of performance. What we did with the additional money that was pooled there is we created going back to meeting with the care team, and I'm being mindful of time. Through that care team, asked them, when you guys have residents that come in, you get all of this information about the residents. And what happens is all that information about the residents, if we think that they're each a person with their own story and not resident number 252, then how do we take all the information we learn about the residents and get our care team to memorize it? So you're smiling. How do you get them to memorize it? So I had a town hall and said, hey, what do we need to do to get you guys, all the key influencers as far as the care team, frontline team, and they're all looking around like, this guy's lost his mind. we're not going to memorize this. And so this girl in the back, everyone's got one, raises her hand, and she says, I'll tell you, Mr. Les, what you got to do. You got to pay our ass. And so I said, okay, well, I don't really use the word ass, but I say hiney in our house, so I'm going to put pay our hiney on the board. And so I wrote it on the board, and what ended up happening coming out of that is, I'll never forget, is this moment where you're hearing that care team. They're saying, you don't understand our life. When we leave here, I got to go to my next job, or I got to go take care of my mom. And I'll never forget LaShonda, and her as clear as she could be, if you want us to do something, we want to care for the resident at a different level. And so what we did is we eliminated a position, created a pool of money, because I have to keep investors in mind. We now have a pool of money that we can use that's financially aligned to give a better level of care. Because when people come and tour your building and say, they give better care, we give better care, we say we give better care because we memorize the life history of your mother. And so what we did is put together, and we're on the 5th iteration now. It's a 136 question test based on, it's fill in the blank. And again, we're rolling this out. We haven't perfected it across the board. We're 2 years in of iterations of this assessment, and we don't use the word test because they're scared of tests, because most of our care team didn't do very well in school. But it's a voluntary opportunity to participate, to remember the life history of the resident. And what ends up happening is, before people are coming on shift, they're sitting there with flashcards, memorizing how to deliver better care to the residents. Where did they work? We call it family history, residents, accomplishments, motivators. And so when something changes in their care plan, we insert that into the motivator. And in the motivator, now we're able to disseminate that among all the staff. And they're financially incentivized up to 15% of their pay. So if they make, it's 300 extra bucks to us, may not mean anything, but 300 extra bucks per month per paycheck to them is life-changing. Mm-hmm. And so what ends up happening is, now we've honored the investor, because we said we created money from where it wasn't, because we got buy-in from the ED. So again, you're talking about wages. Totally different way to look at wages. So we're top of market pay now, but they're financially aligned with us. We're able to deliver better care because of what we're doing. So creative way, innovation.
Great way. So I know, Michael, we've got...
Yeah, unfortunately, we're out of time, but this is a topic that I know we could probably do a whole event on. And
Right.
You guys did an excellent job in the time frame here. And of course, we can continue the conversations after the session. But thank you guys so much for a wonderful panel. And momentarily, we begin.